Father, just touch them to bless this time together. And we just pray now that you'll continue to watch over us. These things we ask in your name. Amen.
Councilman Leach, please.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Mr. Azinger, can you hear us this evening?
Yes.
All right, thank you. I'd like to call to order this regular session of the Vienna City Council for April the 13th, 2023. Let the record reflect that I've taken roll, that all members are present this evening, with the exception of Councilman Bibby, who will not be here this evening, and Councilman Azinger, who is joining us by phone. First item on our agenda this evening is our public forum. We have two people that have signed up to speak, and so we'll start this evening with Chad Emmerich.
Good evening. My name is Chad Emmerich, and I am a resident of Vienna, West Virginia. Over the last several months, Vienna residents have expressed concern about businesses and business operations starting on 23rd Street and extending to 60th Street. The first of these concerns were opened when a vape shop opened on the commercial property on the corner of 34th and Grand Central in the building formerly known as Dairy Queen. Although large opposition was voiced regarding this matter, the city was unable to take action since the business had already been granted a business license. And also due to the fact that the city had not proactively taken steps to regulate certain types of businesses and operations within our community. Now the city is faced with yet another potential issue concerning a property located on 57th Street in Grand Central that was previously zoned commercial. The new owners have requested that the city approve the rezoning of this property so that it can be operated commercially once again. Now there is another concern about the future use of this building voiced by many members of our community about what this may mean and hold for the future. Currently, there is no issue with what the new owners have intended to use it for, but Vienna residents want to be assured that no future use would raise concerns in our community, especially due to the fact of its close proximity to a local church and to a residential area. During the March 23rd council meeting, Councilman Chris Mancuso brought a resolution that he and Councilwoman Kim Williams sponsored to this body for consideration, which they hoped would regulate vape and smoke shops. That motion and that reading failed to pass. The agenda item was agenda item number 6, ordinance first reading, defining, regulating the location of vape/smoke shops, sponsored by Councilman Chris Mancuso and Councilwoman Kim Williams. Although I am not an elected member of this governing body, I am an advocate for the citizens and the businesses of Vienna, and I have had multiple conversations with members and leaders of our community, and I would like to present you with this valid option. The purpose is to provide, which you have a copy of as well. The purpose is to provide oversight on the location of any business that has age restriction requirements for either the purchase of goods, services, or entry within the C1 zoning district or within any district. They may operate in a non-C1 zone or non-conforming use north of 23rd Street to 60th Street of Vienna, West Virginia. It is not the purpose of this recommendation to permanently bar any businesses that may have age restrictions from lawfully operating within the geographical selection of the city of Vienna, or to expressly regulate any one business service within the C1 zoning district or those operating in non-C1 zone as non-conforming use. The definition that I have given on age-restricted business would apply and be defined as any business that has age restrictions on either the purchase of goods, services, or entry. If adopted as an ordinance, any age-restricted business operating in the city of Vienna, north of 23rd Street to 60th Street, or to the northernmost city limit, shall comply with the following. No age-restricted business shall be located within 15 feet of any church, synagogue, temple, mosque, or other places of worship. No age-restricted businesses shall be located within any daycare facility, childcare facility, parochial, charter, public, or private elementary, middle, or high school, or any other related facilities, including, but not limited to, athletic fields, auditoriums, stadiums, arenas, and other educational facilities operated by the Wood County Board of Education or operated by a charter school or parochial school for educationally related purposes. Age-restricted businesses shall conform to all federal and local laws retaining to the sale or service of age-restricted goods and services. No age-restricted business shall be located within 1,500 feet of any other age-restricted business north of 23rd Street to 60th Street or the northernmost city limit. A variance could be offered to age-restricted businesses and shall be permitted within C1 zoning district north of 23rd Street and between 23rd Street and 60th Street, subject to the provisions of an approved variance from the City Council. A variance application could consist of applicants desiring to open an age-restricted business within the above geographic location may make application for said variance through the City Code Office, the Planning Commission, and must be brought before City Council for approval before any action may be taken.
Mr. Emmerich,
Yes.
I'm sorry, your time's up, sir.
Well, everybody has copies, and we'll make sure that the rest of them get it.
Thank you. Henry Thompson.
Henry Stasson, 1307 Greenmount Hills Drive here in Vienna. I showed up today because last 4 weeks I've been on the road traveling for swim. Going through, that's what I was going to talk about today, give you guys some updates on some things. Going through, we had the Southeast Ohio, West Virginia Short Course Championship in Canton, Akron 4 weeks ago. Tons of people, everybody from out of town. 3 weeks after that, or a week after that, we were in Morgantown for the West Virginia Short Course Championship. Place was packed. The following week, we were at the Spire Institute up in Mentor, Ohio for the Great Lakes Zone Championship. 12 states, top time seeds from the 12 states. Place was packed. When you go through, and then we just got back from the U.S. National YMCA Championship in Greensboro, where 48 states were represented. There was 1,917 swimmers that met the time cuts. They represented 179 teams across the 48 states, not counting Alaska and Hawaii. People drove, people flew, the place was packed. This past weekend, or week, because it was a week-long event in Greensboro, cost me $2,100. The prior weeks, when it was a Thursday, Friday, Saturday, it was about $1,000 to $1,100. Take that times the number of people that this area is missing out on. It's a lot of money. When you go through and take a look at just some pictures, I think this will work.
The other end, Henry, is great.
Okay. That's the Spire Institute. That's an Olympic-sized pool cut in half. What you got here is it's the partition and the partition. During the long course championship, this will slide back to one, or they both slide back, and it turns into Olympic pool. You had seating up here, seating on this side, about 4,000 people. When you go through and look at the Greensboro facility, it's set up the same way. They had put in another pool in the last couple of years. Now they have 4 because they don't have the capacity to handle everything. So when you think about what you've got, let me get these pictures if this works. It doesn't want to pull up now. CO. Forget it. But what you got is, there's a lot of economic money. And there was a sign that I took a picture of inside the Greensboro facility over the 10-year period, just from the events that they held there for swim. It brought in $182 million worth of economic money. It brought in so many rooms they had it that was acknowledged for swim, because if you go for swim, you call the Chamber of Commerce and they seed you and you get a discounted rate. Going through, they got the long course U.S. Nationals are going to be in Greensboro again. That'll be at the end of July. They also have the Futures Championship, which they'll be holding in 5 different locations. One of them's in Richmond, Virginia, and then there's 4 others, and there's a Seniors Championship as well. So a short course championship is the type of pool you see at the Y, 25 meters. Olympic size pool, which we call long course, is 100. Going through, I met briefly with Pat Manette on Tuesday at his house. He's got other things going on. He said he'll reach out to me next week. But we're looking to start putting together a team of about 30 to 35 people across function. And I've been working with Ryan Radcliffe out of Parkersburg South and piecing out. So like for Vienna, I'm going to come in, I'm going to say, okay, can I have one person from Vienna City Council that can have a seat on this board of 30 to 35 people? I'm going to do the same with the school board, same with Parkersburg, same with Marietta, same with Camden Clark, same with Marietta Memorial, and so forth. To start getting things pieced together to see what would it take to put something in. Since there's a lot of money, whether it's soccer that's leaving the area, swim that's leaving the area, we got to do something because we're left behind. That's all I got. Thanks.
The minutes from the regular council meeting on March the 23rd, 2023 have been printed, posted, and circulated. Are there any corrections to the minutes? If there are no objections, then the minutes will stand approved as posted. Report of the treasurer, Councilman Leach.
Reconciliation funds for City of Vienna dated April 6, 2023 have been provided. I've reviewed the accounts. They appear in order, and the city is financially sound.
All right, thank you. So we have no unfinished business this evening. We move right into new business. Our agenda says we have a proclamation this evening for Fair Housing Month. We actually have 2 proclamations, so we'll start with the Fair Housing Month. Whereas April marks the anniversary of the passage of the Fair Housing Act of 1968, which sought to eliminate discrimination in housing opportunities and to affirmatively further housing choices for all Americans. And whereas the ongoing struggle for dignity and housing opportunity for all is not the exclusive province of the federal government. And whereas vigorous local efforts to combat discrimination can be as effective, if not more so, than federal efforts. And whereas illegal barriers to equal opportunity in housing, no matter how subtle, diminish the rights of all. Now therefore be it resolved that in the pursuit of the shared goal and the responsibility of providing equal housing opportunities for all men and women, the City of Vienna, West Virginia, does hereby join in the national celebration of the 55th anniversary of the Fair Housing Act by proclaiming April 2023 as Fair Housing Month, and encourages all agencies, institutions, and individuals, public and private, in the City of Vienna, West Virginia, to abide by the letter and the spirit of the Fair Housing Law. This is signed and sealed the 13th of April, 2023. Second proclamation we have for this evening is our Arbor Day proclamation. Whereas in 1872, J. Sterling Morton proposed to the Nebraska Board of Agriculture that a special day be set aside for the planting of trees. And whereas this holiday, called Arbor Day, was first observed with the planting of more than 1 million trees in Nebraska. And whereas Arbor Day is now observed throughout the nation and the world. And whereas trees can reduce erosion of our precious topsoil by wind and water, lower our heating and cooling costs, moderate our temperatures, clean the air, produce oxygen, and provide habitat for wildlife. And whereas trees are a renewable resource, giving us paper, wood for our homes, fuel for our fires, and countless other wood products. And whereas trees in our city increase property value, enhance the economic vitality of business areas, and beautify our community. And whereas trees, wherever they are planted, are a source of joy and spiritual renewal. Now, therefore, I, Randall C. Rapp, Mayor of the City of Vienna, do hereby proclaim April the 21st, 2023 as Arbor Day in the City of Vienna, and encourage all citizens to celebrate Arbor Day and to support efforts to protect our trees and woodlands. And further, I urge all citizens to plant trees and gladden the heart and promote the well-being of this and future generations. We will be having our Arbor Day celebration. Jack, what time is that? 10 o'clock? It's at 10 o'clock up at 60th Street, where we will be planting trees again. So if you'd care to join us for that, you are more than welcome to do that. April 21st, 10 o'clock, 60th Street at the Utility Board. Okay?
No, it's tomorrow.
Tomorrow's the 20th. It's the 21st.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. By the way, Mon Power is donating some of the trees, therefore, they go.
Okay, thank you, Jack. All right. Second item on our agenda this evening is the Hino truck financing. Councilman Leach.
Sealed bids for the financing of a 2023 Hino XL8 truck for the street department were opened on March 2023 at 8:30 a.m. with the following results. United Bank 3-year rate 4.60% for a total cost of $172,557.72. 4-year rate 4.80% for a total cost of $177,153.12. Second bid, Country Roads Leasing, 3-year rate 3.75% for a total of $171,007.08. 4-year rate 3.95% for a total of $174,983.16. After careful review of the bid proposals, the recommendation for council approval from the Budget Finance Committee for the financing of the 2023 Hino XL truck is Country Roads Leasing, 3-year rate 3.75% for a total payment of $171,007.08. Funding for the project is out of General Fund 0157059.
I'll entertain a motion for the approval of the sealed bid from Country Roads Leasing for a 3-year term in the amount of 3.75% at $171,007.08.
So moved.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded that we approve the bid from Country Roads Leasing for the 2023 Hino XL8 truck. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, then I'll call for the question. All those in favor of the bid from Country Roads Leasing, please signify by raising up. Excuse me. Mr. Azinger's with us.
Yes. Ms. Williams?
Yes.
Mr. Azinger?
Yes.
Mr. Leach?
Yes.
Mr. Rapp?
Yes.
I say yes. Mr. Mancuso?
Yes.
All right. Passes unanimously. Next item on our agenda this evening is a bid approval for 2 custom playground pieces. Councilman Leach.
First of all, Steve, I always appreciate you giving us the detail that you do so we can see exactly what we're talking about. So thank you for that. Sealed bids for 2 custom playground pieces were open on March 24, 2023 at 10 a.m. with the following results. Davis Athletics being the only bidder. Part 1, $38,000. Part 2, $34,000. Total $72,000. This bid packet was sent to 5 companies, Davis Athletics being the only one that responded. After careful review, the bid proposals for the recommendation of council approval for Budget and Finance Committee for 2 custom playground pieces is Davis Athletics for $72,000. Funding for this project it comes from General Fund, line item 540-6558, pending council approval. And this includes a matching grant from the Spartan Foundation.
I'll entertain a motion for the approval of the bid from Davis Athletics in the amount of $72,000 for 2 custom playground pieces.
So moved.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded that we approve the bid from Davis Athletics. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, then I'll call for the question. All those in favor of the bid from Davis Athletics for $72,000, please answer accordingly.
Ms. Williams?
Yes.
Mr. Azinger?
Yes.
Mr. Leach?
Yes.
Mr. Rapp?
Yes.
I say yes. Mr. Mancuso?
Yes.
Item number 4 this evening is a discussion and update to clear up the confusion regarding the land use covenant at the Spencer's Landing parcel, and an update on the status of the certificate of completion for the production side of the Manville property. Mr. Leach, do you want to start that discussion, or would you like me to do it?
Well, let me just, as far as Spencer's Landing, I reviewed an email that was sent to Derek Hancock in his response, and I thought it was pretty thorough and explained the situation. And we've talked about this many times, but the situation Spencer's Landing is the entire site was surveyed in the voluntary remediation program. And as groundwater and soil sampling was done, just portions of Spencer's Landing were identified as having mostly, and I think almost exclusively, concentrations of arsenic that was above what is called the de minimis level. And as we've talked about many times, arsenic is a naturally occurring constituent, and in fact, it's in all of our backyards. But because it was in the voluntary remediation program, it had to meet those de minimis. So those areas were identified by GPS mapping. They were remediated in accordance with the West Virginia DEP regulations. It does not cover the entire site of Spencer's Landing. And also, it does not prevent future development. If you're going to do something and disturb an area that has been delineated as an area of concern on the site, then you simply have to follow the DEP regulations in doing that. You have to, follow their procedures in excavation and so forth, and it just basically, there's just a list of rules. You have to have what's I guess the acronym is HAZWOPER, supervision, somebody who's trained in that type of work to supervise the work to make sure it's done in accordance, and then you can develop the property in whatever way the city deems fit as we're moving forward. So, and then there was, questions and concerns with respect to the swale there that was filled. The fill for that project came from Jackson Park, and that same fill is what was used originally to cap the site, the areas the DEP designated as needing capped. That soil had been tested, was approved for use, and they did the initial fill, and I'm sure it will continue to be developed and graded and seeded in whatever capacity it needs to be. So as far as Spencer's Landing, I hope that makes clear, what is the status there. We have received the certificate of completion. Spencer's Landing has done everything required to comply with the voluntary remediation program, and it is out of the program. Now, the DEP does reserve the right, as things move forward, they can change regulations and standards, and if so, they could reopen that, but that would be administrative decisions from the DEP, and it's not, does not reflect anything, because everything that we've done is in compliance with their program as it stands today. So with respect to Johns Manville, so we have two things going on with Manville right now, okay? First is continuing to work toward the certificate of completion and be in compliance with the requirements based on same thing. Groundwater testing, soil sampling, those areas have been identified. Everything that was identified has already been or had the engineering controls applied, just like with Spencer's Landing. Various areas are either, they're the same thing. They're designated by GPS coordinates as the areas that if you are going to work in those areas, then you need to continue to comply with those requirements that I just described. The other thing that they require, and fortunately we've been doing, is M&A sampling. In other words, they require, even though we've done our required rounds of sampling of soil and groundwater for the voluntary remediation program, the M&A program, monitoring natural attenuation, is we were required to, and actually that wouldn't have necessarily started until we were out of the voluntary remediation program, but we were able to start doing that contemporaneously. And that monitored natural attenuation testing requires that you do an additional 8 rounds of sampling to determine whether any of these constituents of concerns, in other words, whatever, the different constituents they're looking at, the things in either in soil, groundwater, and again, it's arsenic, but on the production side, there's some other constituents. And it is demonstrating that those are naturally attenuating, such that our licensed remediation specialist now is predicting that we will be done and we will not have to continue monitoring. And then, of course, that site is also a Superfund site because the plume from the dry cleaning also has monitoring wells in that area. And so we surrender. They'll probably keep our wells open so they can continue to monitor those because the dry cleaning plume is a much more significant issue than anything we're dealing with at Manville. And so, and then where we stand in terms of the completion of the product, because there's not a lot going on there, we also are combining our risk assessment and final completion report. The DEP is allowing us to combine those reports just as we did on the Spencer's Landing site. And again, the remedial action plan, the remedial action has already been done. All right. And so we're submitting the work that was done there in conjunction with our final report in order to seek a certificate of completion from the DEP. I asked Tom Rebar for an update just specifically for the purpose of this meeting. And he is predicting, basically we've already submitted reports. We get comments back from the DEP of any issues or questions they have. Those get responded to. Once we've satisfied any questions that they have, then we submit this combined final report and seeking the certificate of completion. And after all of this time, the prediction right now is mid-June that we could be in a position to close that site out as well and get the certificate of completion. So maybe not very succinct, but that's the best I can report as to where we stand right now.
Can I ask a question? Okay, because I think for me and maybe others, this is where the confusion lies about the land use covenant. Because I have the land use covenant and I've read it, I don't know how many times, but anyway, that it applies to the entire described property, 2901 River Road, okay?
It's a 17-acre parcel.
Right. Yeah. So that, and I also have a copy of the email that Derek Hancock sent, okay, in which he states that, the entire site is restricted for excavation, drilling, or penetration of the ground surface unless certain requirements are covered in detail within the land use covenants 3A through E. And
well, let's take those one at a time, if you don't mind. So to that point,
okay.
All right, sure, the entire parcel is covered, all right? And so we say DEP, we want to do excavation here. There's no restriction here. Have at it, okay? We want to do excavation here. That's a GPS designated area that you need to comply with the standards because you are digging. So yeah, sure, it applies to everything. And all we have to identify is if whatever work we're doing, either it's an area that's regulated or it's an area that's not. Okay. Does that make sense?
Well, no, it doesn't because... Well, because I have another part of the question, which you didn't answer, which is because it says that it goes back to part 3, A through E, and it lays out if you want to excavate, drill, penetrate the ground, you have to meet the following requirements, okay? And some of these requirements are really, I don't think they're very restrictive in any sense of the word, but it lays it out. So, but you're saying you don't have to follow these requirements?
No, Kim, that's not what I'm saying. I'm saying you have to identify to them because the entire tract, the deed, is subject to a land use covenant, okay? Mm-hmm. And so the land use covenant says that you will comply with any restrictions within that parcel. And if the restrictions apply, if it is one of the areas that are designated that we capped, that have orange barriers under the dirt, right, as warning, just like an electric line or anything else. So you just have to let them know what you're doing. And then you say, here's where we're going to work. And they say, that's not a restricted area. There's no problem there. You say, we're going to work over here. Like, for example, under the parking lot where some of that is GPS out. Then they say, yes, here you have to follow. And again, basically the HAZWOPER regulations, the regulations of how, you can't crack dirt. You can't, employees have to be supervised by somebody with this certification. Mm-hmm. So, yeah, so think of it as, like I said, it's just basically, depending on where you want to work, determines what requirements you have to meet. If it's not a designated area, then you can do whatever you want. It's just like, for example, in the swale, and I think that Derek addressed that. You know, that area was not, let's call it regulated, okay? And so there was no restriction in the work that we did there, okay? But if you, and same thing where we covered the road, even though that was not a part of the requirement, that was that old dirt road, and we capped it. That had nothing to do with it. It was just, we were there and we did it. Okay, so, yeah, so.
Okay, so let me just be more specific with my question then. Because I understand the 7 capped areas. That's, you know, what's identified in the GPS. If you go into Spencer's Landing and you're not in one of those 7 capped areas and you decide you want to dig a 5-foot hole, can you do that without calling or notifying the DEP and having the work performed in accordance with applicable health and safety laws and regulations and a soil management plan developed by the...
So I'll say there are no applicable, I mean, I will not say that you don't need to let them know, but I don't think so. But I will tell you that I absolutely believe that if I want to go dig a 5-foot hole outside one of those GPS areas, there is no involvement there's no oversight from the DEP, there's no regulation involved.
Okay, because that's what you're saying is actually contradictory to what is in here. Because, I mean, you know.
That's the funny thing about, you know, how you interpret things when you read it on paper and how things actually work, okay? It's my understanding, and I've been involved with this for a long time, is that maybe, I can't say this, maybe we do need to tell them if we're going to do some site development work. I can't answer that. But what I can say is that if it's not in one of those designated areas, then, you know, if we need to get their blessing, fine, but there's no regulation working in those areas. We can do whatever we want there.
Right. So I understand completely the 7 areas that you're talking about. It's just right here, it says that you have to do that. So I don't understand why you don't know, because it says here that you have to do that. You have to let them know.
Kim, let me try to clear this up for you just a little bit.
Sure.
I'm like Jim, you know, we've been in this process for a number of years, okay? And so, and it's the same thing as Mrs. Rhodes over there. The comments that I made about the entire piece of that down there are 7 areas down there that you cannot bother, okay? They're the ones that are segregated off. The rest of that was designated as recreational area, not residential.
Right.
You can't build anything down there where someone's going to stay overnight. But from a recreational standpoint, if you want to do an amphitheater, you want to do anything where you can have people come in and, you know, spend an afternoon and then leave, it's permissible. And so at some point, when we get ready to build the restrooms down there that people are asking for, we'll have to dig a trench. All right? So we'll notify Derek Hancock, because he's the specialist we've been working with, that we're going to dig a trench to install a sewer line or a water line, whatever it is, and explain to him the process. Now, when we dig the line, we're going to put the same dirt right back in the hole. And so we're not transporting any of that dirt off-site. And so when Mr. Leach says, you know, do we have to call them to be on the side of caution? We will notify them. Every time we do something down there of any significance, we will notify them that we are going to disturb the soil. All right? I mean, Jim's right. It's a clean site. We don't have to do another thing down there to remediate it.
Right. I understand that. You have your certificate of completion. The question just was, you know, what you can do in accordance with this land covenant. And beyond those 7 restricted areas, like I said, if you want to go and dig a 5-foot hole in the middle, you know, of Spencer's Landing, not one of these 7 restricted areas, there in part 3, A through E tells you all the things that you need to do. So that's the question. That clears it up. If you follow this land covenant, this is filed with the county. Anybody can go online and look at it and read it. But you will have to meet these requirements that are spelled out here. And like I said, and I don't think they're that difficult.
So what is the point? I mean, okay, so we have a land use covenant. I can't answer a nuance to a question that you have because I didn't know you were going to ask that question. But the point is that let me go back to the residential versus recreational, because this was a question as we were going through the risk assessment for Spencer's Landing. We were close to being at the residential standard there, okay? And the way that they do this risk assessment is they do the modeling and see if they can risk away the exposure pathway, all right? And it was determined at that time that there was not an interest in residential development. First of all, it's in the floodplain, okay? And so that would bring in bring in the floodplain ordinance. And you would have to be, I don't know what the elevation is, but probably 10 to 14 feet above the deck to build anything residential. So there wasn't an interest in that, and so we didn't pursue that. Because the recreational standard, which we met pretty easily, is what was determined that we were going to achieve, and we did, okay? So the nuance of what the notification requirement is, as the mayor said, that as we start to develop and do work there, obviously we're going to communicate with the DEP and make sure we meet their requirements. But again, whereas I can't say if we're going to dig a 5-foot hole in a non-designated area, do we have to contact them? I don't know. I don't think so, but maybe.
Yeah, you do.
Well, fine. Then,
it's according to this. You
okay,
do.
fine. So we let them know. Or do we have to meet any additional requirements in terms of development in that non-designated area? That I'm solid on. No. Okay, so that's the best I can answer your question.
So if I can just kind of follow up with a question on that then, because I think I understand what you're saying. There's basically steps that you have to follow, right? If we're going to do work down there, we notify the DEP. If it's not in a designated area, great. If it is, then they have to have oversight. That's kind of how I understand this, right?
That's it, pretty much.
So, okay, so then I guess I have a couple of follow-up questions to that. Did we have to notify them when we moved a bunch of dirt down there to fill in the swale?
We did not.
And why not? Because I feel like that was going
And
on.
that goes to my point that I don't think so. And I think, did Derek address that?
Yeah, it's right here.
Yeah.
Let's see, where's his answer on that?
It's about 4 from the bottom.
The plan to remove the trees to the north of the site was communicated to me via a phone call from Tom Rebar and was not in violation of the land use covenants.
Okay, so we did communicate with them.
We did.
That was happening. Okay, that was just my question: is have we been communicating that with them as we're doing work? Because I know we have the memorial and stuff down there, so I'm assuming we communicated with them on that. And I want to make sure that those have been, followed, and especially moving forward, because I know that there's been a lot of talk, and I think hopefully at the end of, understanding this, it sounds like that there's opportunity for development down there. I presented a plan last year about a concept design for that council approved, and I think it sounds like we're at a point now where we should definitely think about moving forward and getting some final designs in place to really make something happen down there.
So that everybody understands, there are restrictive covenants in the deed. Restrictive covenants in the deed say basically you can't use it for anything where people are going to stay there for long periods of time. Houses, hospitals, schools, and all. There's a restrictive covenant in the actual deed for the entire parcel, including the 17 acres, that says you can't use it to do anything to disturb or use the groundwater, and which doesn't matter for the city of Vienna, because 9 years ago we passed, I think it was 8 or 9 years ago, we passed an ordinance that says you can't build walls. So those are two of the restrictive covenants. Then you have the land use covenant agreement that has been all part of this that incorporates those. And the first two, it says you can't put schools, daycares, nursing homes, or other residential style facilities. You can't use or extract groundwater for any purpose other than remediation. You can't do excavation, drilling, or penetration of ground surface unless it meets the 5 things that are in paragraphs A through E. I think everybody is saying the same thing, but I don't know that they're listening, because typically my experience with this has been when we work for a period of time with somebody like Mr. Hancock, Mr. Hancock will say, and I'm not privy to this, but this has been my experience, as long as you don't mess with the 7 areas that are capped, you don't have to worry about it. Now, they don't put that in the agreement because Mr. Hancock may leave, Mr. Leach may, all of us may not be here. 5 years down the road, we've got a new generation of people to deal with it. So they look at the agreement, and then it gives them the opportunity to develop a relationship. Okay? So I think for once, everybody's correct. But the land use covenant does apply to the 17 acres that are down there. It has the restrictions that are set out. I'm not going to read them to you. I think there's a relationship where it may not be necessary after a certain point to contact the DEP to get authorization to do things down there within those areas, as long as it doesn't affect the 6 or 7 capped off areas. I can't remember. 7. Mr. Hancock gave us a nice response that was bullet pointed or numbered.
We paid for it.
Listen, yeah, we sure did. But he gave us a nice response that talks about what the restrictions are. 2 of the things that he said that have been germane to this entire conversation. The plan to remove the trees to the north of the site was communicated to me by a call from Mr. Rebar and was not a violation of the land use covenant. The clean fill added to the area north of the engineering controls to expand the park did not violate the land use covenant. I think it's a reasonable conclusion that Mr. Leach has made, which is if we do things on the property that aren't around those areas, we're probably safe and, from dealing with any kind of fallout from the DEP. But there's no permit that was required to perform any of that work, and so I think you guys have all, you've all addressed the points that were brought. It seems fairly clear to me.
Ms. Rhodes, you're the one that asked for this, so I'm going to ask you, have we answered your concerns and questions?
I think that what Russ is saying is right. I think it's a matter of how things are worded. Because in that email from Gary, he makes it clear that the whole 17 restrictions. So, and I understand the engineering controls. That even if we do something, this is what was communicated to me from Mrs. Britt. So outside of those engineering controls, if we wanted to take that life at home, we would still have to notify the DEP within 5 days prior to doing it. And then there's still the remediation steps that have to be followed. It doesn't mean we can't do it.
That's not correct.
There won't be.
I don't think you have to do, and I think that's the difference, is if it's in one of the 7 capped areas, there are remediation steps that you would have to take to make sure that whatever contaminants aren't disturbed in those areas. But outside of those areas, I think all you have to do is notify the work to be done in outside of those 7 capped areas, and that would be the extent of it. I mean, aside from if you put a concrete pad down there, you have a paper barrier. If that makes sense.
It makes sense, but I'll talk to Mrs. Brooke again.
I don't know who this is.
She's there.
She is the supervisor. Okay.
No, the paperwork that I've seen says that the land use covenants say what they say. The excavation, drilling, or penetration of the ground surface unless the following requirements are met. As long as it meets these requirements, it's an issue. But the only time that you're going to have those requirements met is if you dig with property where you have to be remediated with the contaminated area.
So let me ask you, what is the question that you have that we have not answered for you?
I just think that it's a difference of opinion and interpretation. Because in the land use covenants, it says the whole 17.09 acres are part of the land use covenants. And then it goes on to say that it can be used for recreational, residential. And then it says, there's limitations on 3, A, B, C, D. And that if anything is done on that property, which consists of 17 acres, then those steps have to be followed for anything that's done on that property. It doesn't segregate out the engineering controls. They're just listed on the second page after the 3 A, B, C, D, and E.
So that's
Mayor, I'll
absolutely,
take it upon myself to answer Kim's question and yours. What requirements if we are in the non-designated areas as far as communication? Because the land use covenant, as I said, it is restrictive for the entire 17 acres, for example, for residential and designated developments. You just can't do it, okay? But beyond that, the narrow specific question that I understand you're asking is what is the requirement if we are working in a non-designated area for notification of the DEP and any required approval? Okay, that's a fair question. And like I said, I can't answer that tonight, but because each time, when we get billed for the DEP's time too. And and so if that's something that I can get a definitive answer, then I will submit that to council and and like I said, I already texted Tom as this came up, and I can get a response. So I'll get that question answered. But as far as I know, that's the only question right now that's not resolved. Is that correct?
Basically, yeah.
Okay.
I mean, I'm real clear on everything else. It's just that, it's always been said that it's just in terms of we can't do anything.
Well, I think that's clearly demonstrated by the fact that we said we're putting all this dirt in, we're working in this area. Any problem? We're taking these trees out. Any problem? No. Right.
And I'm not saying that we can't do that down there. We just have to follow the steps that are in the use covenant. That's the only thing that I'm saying. If you want to say put the water lines in for the restrooms and do the trench, you need to just notify them within the 5-day period prior to doing that. And then the steps that are listed in that section 3 have to be followed in order to do it to their requirements. So they say
for most of the project down there, we have exceeded the requirements that they put on us. If they ask us for a 3-foot cap, we typically put 5 to 8 foot of dirt on it. So the land use covenant that's on that 17 acres covers the entire thing. All right, no question. However, anything that we do to improve that facility down there, the water lines for the restrooms, et cetera, we will notify Derek Hancock of what our plan is and how we intend to do it. And we can basically do anything we want as long as we tell them what we're going to do and how we're going to do it. The 7 sites that are down there that are restricted, you have to leave those alone. Other than that, as long as we inform them of what our plan is and how we're going to do it, we're good.
I'm sorry, Mayor, I'm going to disagree. We don't have to leave them alone. We are able to work in any segment of that. If we disturb one of those 7 areas, there are just additional requirements in order to do that. And so that would definitely involve DEP, licensed remediation specialist oversight. But we can do it. I want to be clear on that.
and I don't disagree with that in the way that I read it. Those engineering controls are part of the 17 acres. So those restrictions have to be met for all.
The engineering controls were the caps, and then don't bother the caps without following specific regulations. Those are the engineering controls. Anyway, so I will, and then if the response I get doesn't satisfy you, we can go on.
So once again, what's the response? What's the question you're going to ask Mr. Hancock?
Very specifically, if we are working at Spencer's Landing in areas that are not the 7 designated sites, what notice requirements do we need to provide the DEP, and what response, if any, do we need from them to proceed? Is that fair?
Okay, because it says in D, the owner of the real property provides a written notice to the West Virginia Department of Environmental Protection of the intent to conduct such work no less than 5 days prior to the beginning unless a waiver is granted by the West Virginia DEP.
Right. So, and we may get that waiver if it's not in that. Say, can we work in these areas? But obviously, we've already complied with that when we did the fill and the tree removal, right? Because they were notified. They said, no problem, do it. So we've already done that. And I wasn't involved really in that.
Well, the point is we didn't have to take any additional steps.
We just, I guess, basically, the question about the land covenant is, does 3A through E apply to everything?
Yes.
Yes.
The question, the answer,
it does.
But then the nuance is how. And then that's what.
All right. A through E, I've got it. And like I said, it wouldn't surprise me, but I don't know the answer to that question. And if so, how? Because maybe we can get away with it. You know,
Yeah,
say,
that'd be
could we
great.
work, anywhere else?
And then not have to.
Yeah, and, yeah.
Especially as we contemplate development,
Right.
if you get a waiver on areas of not the 7 engineering controls, then that'd be great.
Well, that's why, I have such confidence in our administration department heads, because they do those things. All right, I got it.
And I know that you disagreed with me a moment ago, Jim, but the practical side of it is those areas were under more restrictive covenants than the other acreage. And so we try our best to stay away from them. That's my point. When I say we're not going to do that, if there's a way around it, we're not going to
I
disturb
don't think
it.
we're going to be able to when we fully develop Spencer's Landing. I don't think we're going to be able to stay away from it.
We'll see.
Yeah.
Yeah, it depends.
It's just basically, you can't track the dirt. It's not that much. It's because the same requirements when we capped it, all right, would apply. And it wasn't that, it's just simply clean up after yourself. Make sure you don't track this all over town. Clean your equipment before it leaves the site. It's just good housekeeping. If you're going to dispose of dirt that's in that capped area, you have to dispose of it at an appropriate site. I mean, good housekeeping.
Any other questions? When Jim reaches out to Derek, we'll give you his answer. All right? All right. Last item on our agenda this evening is a resolution adopting the Vienna Trail Network. Councilman Mancuso, this is yours, so if you give us an overview, please.
Yeah, I'll be brief about this. We presented this maybe a month ago or two. Tracy came in and kind of gave a presentation, and we got some feedback on some of the bicycle trails in the city of Vienna. Her and I've gone back and forth a few times on the exact routes. I've actually talked with Chief Pfeiffer to make sure that the bike routes and stuff are on safe roads and aren't going to be a hazard or pose any kind of huge danger to people bicycling. And so what we've come up with is kind of this final trail map, which is basically a base plan that we can use to start to really develop bicycle networks through the city of Vienna, and then hopefully one day be able to connect to Parkersburg and Williamstown.
When Councilman Mancuso came to discuss this, I asked him for one thing, and that was for him to have a conversation with the police department and review from the traffic outlook about this plan. I know you did because I followed up with Chief Pfeiffer. So would you give us a review of what the police department's opinion was on the actual location of the proposed trail?
Yeah. So I emailed him, and he said he has no issue with the routes. He thinks it's a great thing for the city of Vienna and will support it in any way the police department can. The one thing he said is he would like to put together some general bicycle safety reminders to the public. And I told him that would be a really great thing to have and do. And hopefully, once we kind of get some other things figured out with this, we can have kind of a kickoff event where we can have some safety kind of training and kind of a celebration and maybe even a bike ride through some of the trails with a big group of people. So,
all right. So I'll entertain a motion for the approval of the resolution adopting the Vienna Trail Network as presented on our drawing here.
So moved.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded that we approve the Vienna Trail Network. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none then, would you poll the council?
Yes. Ms. Williams?
Yes.
Mr. Azinger?
Tom, are you still there? We've lost Mr. Azinger.
Okay. Mr. Leach?
Yes.
Mr. Rapp?
Yes.
I say yes. Mr. Mancuso?
Yes.
All right. So you'll forward our approval to Tracy and let her put us in the system?
Yep. So that will be available on their www website. I think it's www.org. And she'll kind of post that there. I think there's also a QR code that's associated with it, so you can scan that and kind of pull it up on your phone and stuff as well. So,
all right. That concludes our agenda for this evening. Are there any council comments? All right, hearing none then.